Hey, welcome, folks. My name is Rajesh Chandy. I'm one of the authors of this paper. I'm also academic director of the Wheeler Institute at London Business School. We're absolutely delighted you're able to join. My role here is to really introduce the key drivers behind this project that we'll hear about. Iris Steenkamp, at Bocconi University, and Gaurav Mehta at Dharma Life and the University of Cologne, both of whom you can see on video there. What I will do is start this conversation. Iris will do all of the stats and the setup and all of the details, but I will start with a video that the Wheeler Institute prepared some time ago that broadly describes this research and provides a very nice overview of that sets the context and gives you a sense of what is involved here. So here's the video.
ये धर्मा लाइफ से जुड़ी हूँ तो समाज के लिए मुझे थोड़ा बहुत उनको आगे बढ़ाने के लिए करना।
गांव में बहुत सारे मतलब महिलाओं से मिलती थी तो उनका यही रहता था,
बस वो बड़ी होकर अच्छी सी पढ़ाई करें और उसके लक्ष्य को प्राप्त करें, बस यही होगा।
A research project that I'm doing together with Dharma Life looks at the impact that being a sales entrepreneur has on the individual. And in particular, we're looking in a context in India where rural women get the opportunity to become an entrepreneur and to start selling social goods towards villages surrounding them. And how is this going to impact gender empowerment?
Dharma Life was initially a student project during my MBA. It was conceived in one of the entrepreneurship classes, and then a group of my classmates came to India. The idea was, how can we create livelihoods for unemployed or underprivileged men and women in villages? Since then, we moved to a women-first model as Dharma Life, and when we identify women entrepreneurs, they usually are from various backgrounds, but mostly they're underprivileged, either from an income perspective, or there would be women who are not really in the forefront. They don't leave their houses, they're part of the family, and there's a lot of kind of gender biases in the communities we work in.
औरतों का काम करना, लोग ऐसे सोचते हैं कि ये बाहर कैसे निकल रहे, तो दो तीन बातें बनाती हैं औरतें, कहती हैं कि ये बाहर जा रही है, ऐसा होगा वो होगा, लोग क्या कहेंगे कि अपनी बहू बेटी बाहर काम कर रही है। ऐसे
बुजुर्ग लोग बात नहीं करना पसंद करते थे। मैं कहीं से निकलती थी थोड़ा बहुत ऊपर नीचे तो भी वो ऐसे कहते थे कि ये बहू सही नहीं है। विद्या जी, उनके लिए थोड़ी कठिनाई आएगी क्योंकि एक एज के हिसाब से बाहर निकलना बड़ा मुश्किल होता है। उनको नज़रअंदाज करने की कोशिश करेंगे। उन्हें मैं यही कहूँगी कि कोई बात से घबराओ मत, केवल अपने लक्ष्य की तरफ ध्यान दो।
A lot of the women here cook on fire. So these Dharma Life entrepreneurs educate rural women on the need for clean cooking, and after educating the women on these needs, they offer them with the opportunity to buy these clean cooking stoves, including full service.
घरों में जाके महिलाओं को प्रोत्साहित करना, जैसे चूल्हा जलाती है महिला तो उसके बारे में समझाएं कि चूल्हा जलाती हो तो उससे कितनी प्रॉब्लम होती है, धुआं होता है, धुआं से आँखों में जाते हैं तो आँखों से क्या मोतियाबिंद की प्रॉब्लम होती है, और धुआं होता है जो अपने पेट में जाके मुंह से अंदर जाके फेफड़े वगैरह ख़राब करते हैं और उससे क्या दमा वगैरह सांस की प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है। उस कारण इंडक्शन का यूज़ करोगे तो कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं होगी, आपको कहीं पे भी ले जा सकते हो, ला सकते हो, जैसे कि पंखे में भी चला सकते हो। चूल्हा मतलब गैस होता है वो पंखे में नहीं चला सकते हो आप।
What we see with the rural Dharma Life sales entrepreneurs is that the women get very empowered. They're exposed through new contexts. They have to interact with different people. And all these dimensions actually lead to great empowerment. So as example, we see them creating own identities in the village, getting more respect, but also dynamics within households change. So the woman gets more status and actually takes up more leadership activities within the community.
अब जब मैं धर्मा लाइफ में जुड़ी हूँ, अब वो जैसे उनकी कोई प्रॉब्लम होती है मैं उनकी सोल्व करती हूँ। उन्हें राशन वगैरह ये नहीं मिलता था, काफ़ी गरीब लोग हैं तो बुजुर्ग भी है गरीब भी है, बेचारों के नहीं हो पाता था। तो मैंने कहा ठीक है मैं कुछ करूँगी। तो जैसे मैं उनको जाके फिर मैंने मतलब चुपचाप से जाके वहाँ शिकायत करी कि भाई इनको क्यों नहीं मिल रहा, कितना आ रहा है, क्या है। जैसे मैंने उनको शिकायत करी तो वो लोग घूमने आए, वहाँ देखा उन्होंने कि किन किन को, तो मैंने 5-10 लोगों को इकट्ठा करके मैंने कहा हमारी सुविधा नहीं पहुँच पा रही, और सारे गाँव में आराम से आ रहा, कोई भी व्यक्ति ऐसा नहीं है जो राशन से वंचित है। कोई भी समस्या हुई तो वो लोग, अब जब मैं जाती हूँ ना, तो बाहर खड़े रहते हैं और आते ही मुझे ये बोलते हैं कि बेटा पहले हमें ये बता, हम कब से तेरा इंतज़ार कर रहे हैं। बुजुर्ग लोग बात नहीं करना पसंद करते थे, मैं इज्जत देते हैं, सम्मान देते हैं मेरे को।
Here's over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Rajesh. So let me share my screen and upload the slides. Can you see it now? It's visible? Okay, great. So the video that you just saw was a primer. We're going to look at two outcomes. So these are actually, we've done a very big experiment with a lot of support from the Wheeler Institute. And the first thing that I'm going to show you is actually, can this selling make you more resilient? So let's talk a little bit about selling. And at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you some preliminary insights on empowerment, as you saw in the video. So resilience, what is it? It's this ability to cope with adversity. And in the current world, resilience is becoming increasingly important. In fact, it's a top priority for many policymakers across the world. And in this case, you have to think about health shocks, think about COVID-19 shock that we had, think about environmental shocks. All of these really tap into this urgent need to understand more how vulnerable populations can build resilience. Now, given the importance of resilience, obviously there has been some work done on resilience. So one thing we know is the more money you have, be it income or savings, the more likely you are resilient. This is very strong, well established. We're not so interested in that. We're much more interested in looking at these vulnerable populations because for them, resilience can be much more important. It can be a matter of life and death. And when we look at the past literature that has been done, what we see, there's this predominant focus on NGO and government-driven interventions. And the focus has really been at access or launching these resilience programs, launching, for example, cash programs, food support programs. But what has been documented across the world, both in developing countries as well as in EOCD countries, is that the take-up of these programs that are meant to improve your resilience are very, very low. So yes, there is some effect of these government programs, but there's another issue. The take-up is very low. A second stream of literature looks at these informal risk-sharing agreements. Think about sort of social insurance, where actually people within the community help each other out. However, the results of this are very mixed. Like David McKinsey in his paper in 2016 clearly argues, if the shock affects everyone, think about COVID-19, it has no longer any function because I'm just as affected by the shock. So even if I want to help people in my community, I'm no longer able to do this. What has been missing actually from a lot of research is, what is the role of business and marketing in building resilience? Is there any role for the private sector within this? And in this paper, we're going to look at the impact of employment and particularly of marketing employment in building resilience. And what I will be showing you is that over and above any income effects, that sales employment can reduce personal vulnerability to adversity and help individuals access these external sources that I just mentioned, and thereby improve resilience. So in a minute, I'm going to talk you exactly through what we've done. Let me just clearly map out the three research questions that we're going to answer is, can sales employment help people build resilience and enable them to cope with adversity? If yes, what channels underlie this impact that sales employment has on resilience? And then the third question is the one that we find very important. Who benefits most from sales employment in terms of resilience? Now, before I tell you exactly what we've done, is I do want to highlight again sort of what we're doing. So what we're saying is that actually engaging in this door-to-door selling, as you just saw in the video, can lead to higher resilience. However,
it may be that the relationship is reversed. It may just be that those women that are more resilient are more likely to self-select into sales employment, or it may actually be that they perform better in sales employment. So it's kind of difficult to break this. Another really important thing that we have to keep in mind is we self-select into the jobs. So just comparing a group of women that actually are active as saleswomen to a group of women that are not active as saleswomen is a flawed comparison. There would likely be some inherent differences in their traits, maybe in their resilience or in other dimensions. The third thing that we have to keep in mind is omitted variables. It may be actually that something else is driving both resilience as well as likelihood to take up sales jobs. For example, cognitive ability. So in essence, and this is an issue that comes back every time we try to study the impact that employment has on the individual, omitted variables, reverse causality, and particularly self-selection. People self-select into jobs. And this is one of the beautiful things of this study and of our collaboration with Dharma Life, is we were able to implement a large-scale field experiment with over 1,000 women in rural Uttar Pradesh in India, where we recruited these actually over 1,000 women, and we were able to randomly assign them sales employment, a placebo employment, and in a couple of slides, I'll really go into detail what this placebo employment entails, because this is absolutely crucial for us to actually identify causally the effect that sales has on resilience, or no employment condition. And what we did is we measure resilience during the Delta COVID-19 wave in April 2021. For those of you who don't remember, this was a disastrous wave of COVID. It was absolutely horrible. Over 88% of rural households, again, our study is in rural India, reported a significant fall in income without adequate access to social security. The death toll was very high. Everybody was locked up in their houses. And particularly in rural India, most of the people do not have a fixed wage, or they don't have endless savings. So in essence, what became very evident is that their ability to be resilient, their ability to cope with this adversity, was by depending on external sources of help. So there were these food ration programs, there was PPE distribution, there were some labor programs, some cash programs, and this became absolutely essential for people to deal with this adversity. And when we look, so basically, when we look at resilience, we define it in two parts. We look at psychological resilience, so the ability to cope, your pessimism about the future, all psychologically. But more importantly, we also look at economic resilience, particularly for those more vulnerable populations. One can even argue that this is at least equally of importance. Are you aware of relief programs that can help you, for example, food programs? And were you able to take up these programs? So that's how we define resilience and the two key dimensions that we'll be looking at in this paper. Now, a quick theory, I'm just going to skim over this. So why sales and why resilience? So let's sort of look into resilience. In the face of severe shocks, building resilience doesn't only require internal sources, your savings or an income, but for many populations, it requires access to external sources. As we said, these government-endorsed sources. But in order to take up these sources, you need to know about them. You need to have some information about their existence or how to take them up. Now, this access to this information about the existence and the details of these resources is facilitated through having wide connections, having a diverse set of connections. Not only know your neighbor who may be in the same situation, do you know people that are in different positions that may have access to new information to you? And when we think about sales employment and the very external facing nature of sales employment, that is exactly what it does. It facilitates the opportunities professionally to really start connecting widely. And this is one of our main hypotheses, is by enabling the formation of wide set of connections, really becoming more connected within your community. Sales employment facilitates access to information about relief sources, as well as enable take-up of relief sources. And just also to highlight, sales and any form of selling is one of the most common livelihoods for many people across the world, particularly in low-income countries. So this is something that's very prevalent. Think about people who sell on the markets. They're, for example, their agricultural produce, as an example. Now, what is very important in this paper is this question, like, who benefits most? And what we'll show you is that actually those from the most socially isolated backgrounds will benefit the most from sales employment. At baseline, they're characterized, which is inherent in the social isolated term, by narrow connections and poor access to information, which directly affects their resilience. And this is one example that, to make it more qualitative, is that we really saw is that the women who were most disadvantaged, they took up this intervention. They carried the badge, as you see here on the picture, with so much pride, and actually licensed this now professional identity to really start making connections. And I'll show you some results on this in a little bit. Now, in our context, those who are most socially isolated are those from the lower caste, the scheduled and the tribal caste. So I'll use that term throughout the presentation, so please remember it. But even very recently, there's this paper from 2020, it still shows that those belonging to lower caste face a lot of disadvantages in their opportunities, in their social networks, and other forms of discrimination. So in this paper, we're going to really explore who benefits most from sales employment. I'm going to skim over the slide. This basically recaps what I just said, is that those most socially isolated are characterized by the narrow connections and poor access to information. And therefore, engaging in sales employment actually implies the biggest degree of change. Now they have given that they had such a low base level of connections in terms of width, this actually implies an opportunity to really change this. So a little bit about the research design. So we launched this experiment together with Dharma Life in Uttar Pradesh. Now, what we did is we offered women in the sales treatment condition gig sales employment, and they would sell an assortment of products. Think about female hygiene pads, solar lights, for example. And they would engage in the related marketing campaigns. Exactly like you saw in the video, you can think about having educational campaigns around the use of female hygiene pads. We launched this RCT in 3 neighboring districts in Uttar Pradesh, Jaunpur, Ghazipur, and Ambedkar Nagar. And particularly the rural parts of Uttar Pradesh are characterized by very low female employment. And even within our sample, we saw that less than 9% of the women had any employment at baseline. Of those 9%, 60% did home-based stitching. So it wasn't, most of them didn't have any wage employment. And over 37% of respondents belonged to scheduled and tribal caste, so the most socially disadvantaged caste on average. So what did we do? So we had to recruit over 1,000 women, and with the amazing help from Dharma Life, we had a multiple stage selection process. We mapped out the villages. So what we did is we mapped 4 villages together, and then we selected 1 head village to make sure that there wouldn't be any spillover effects, as well as that there would be enough area for people to start selling. Would they be assigned to sales employment condition? After we did this mapping, we met with the village leaders. We did multiple family visits, and then we organized an introduction day, and I'll show you a picture of that. So, but the selection criteria were as follows. 1 woman was recruited per 4 villages, as I just mentioned, at least 18 years old, access to a smartphone so she could actually take up the interventions, and she had to be married. We chose to only work with married women to reduce the likelihood of her moving throughout the RCT, which meant that we would maybe no longer be able to track her. So this was the event, the introduction event, where we brought all the women. Actually, we picked everyone up by car. We all brought them to a central location. And then we recorded their baseline survey and baseline videos. A point I'll get back to you in a little bit. So in essence, this is the research design, where you can basically see, almost 300 women got no employment, 377 got placebo employment, market research, and 378 got sales employment. Now, what do these employments exactly entail? In the treatment, the women did this gig selling. So that meant they could sell as much or little as they wanted. They had no targets to be reached, and they would engage in the related marketing activities. They had a performance payoff, and they worked independently, meaning they would earn commissions on whatever they sold or based on the related marketing activities that they engaged in. Now, so what do we do in the placebo employment? Because this is absolutely essential for us to rule out certain alternative explanations. Think about income. This is why we had to launch a placebo employment exactly to address this, and I'll show you a table. So rather than going out and selling these products, what we asked the women in the placebo employment to do is what we call market research employment. So they didn't go out and sell these, for example, these female hygiene pads. Instead, they were sent these female hygiene pads at home and were asked, as an example, to test them, to submit various reviews about this. And these reviews and surveys varied in difficulty, examining their willingness to pay, etc. Now, what is essential here is that they also had a performance payoff. So depending on the quality and the informativeness of the survey, they received a payment. And there's a similar uncertainty, and we've done the robustness checks on this. There's an uncertainty. It's not necessary that putting in the effort yields a certain outcome in here as well. They also work independently. So this table really sort of shows what we've done is we really, with this placebo employment, as much as possible, try to mimic all the elements that are in sales employment, except for actually the fact that you have to sell. So go out in your house and start selling. So they had similar training. For example, they had exactly the same management structure. So thereby, by comparing treatment and placebo employment, we can control for all these pecuniary and income and non-pecuniary effects. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip all the intervention checks, but we did all of the intervention checks. Think about participation, take-up, attrition. The table that you can see here shows the income. So we really made sure and always at any point mimicked that they would earn equal amount of money. Because recall, we know that income has an impact on resilience. So therefore, we need to be able to control for this. So a bit about the empirical context. So the women were fully doing all of these selling activities, and all of these activities were in person. And then COVID-19, the Delta wave happened. It started in India, and as a result, India enforced one of the harshest and most extensive COVID-19 lockdowns in the world. Everybody had to stay at home, which directly affected everybody's ability to earn an income. This is a bit of a timeline. Also, when Delta happened, we, and that's us in Dharma Life, we had to pause the intervention as we were not able to do anything. So we paused it for both groups. So here you see a timeline of what we've done. We started more or less in September 29 and then collected this data in June and May 2021. And at the end, I'll show you the recent data that we collected. So we collected, in summary, this data on psychological resilience, inability to cope, and pessimism about the future. Economic resilience, their awareness of relief programs. And we split this in lesser known and known programs. Lesser known programs are programs that not so many people knew about, that weren't as widely advertised, whereas known programs are these programs that everybody knew about. In India, this was the food ration program. Everybody knew about it. Everybody was eligible for a certain amount, at least in our area. And this is a very known one. Most people knew about it. The similar goes then we look at take-up of relief, and we split this in two. We look at formal and informal relief. What does this mean? Formal relief in this case means any relief provided by an official institution or entity. Think about an NGO, think about the government. Whereas informal relief is actually help that is provided to you, say, by a family member. And then last, we look at width of connections, also split by formal and informal. Okay, so let's go dive into the results. So first of all, awareness of lesser known relief programs. Again, these are programs that weren't widely advertised. Most people didn't know about this. But when you look at this graph, you see that we're comparing control, sales, and placebo. Sales group is in the middle. And as Rajesh once actually very beautifully said, is you kind of have to look at this graph, and what we see is that sales really, peaks out, it goes up, which is exactly what we want. It indicates that those women assigned to sales were significantly more aware, more likely to be aware of lesser known relief programs. And Rajesh called this as if putting up the finger to the patriarchy. So I thought it was a nice example. And this is exactly the pattern that we constantly want to see. So given that we have limited time, keep out for this. So this is just when we compare the three groups with each other: control, sales, and placebo. But remember that we're interested in understanding who benefits most, whether that's people from lower caste. So that's exactly what we do. So then what we do is we split these results and we actually by caste. So in the blue box, you see those for lower caste. Well, you see the same pattern for higher caste. You see that this is magnified for those belonging to lower caste, actually suggesting that the effect for lower caste, within lower caste, if you do sales, it helps you even more. What you could also do, so this is the main level of comparison. You can also compare conditional on belonging to sales, who benefits more, higher versus lower caste. In the interest of time, we're not going to look at this. In the paper we do. If you have questions about it, I'm very happy to answer them. But this is going to be the main comparison that we're going to do. So next we look at percentage that are aware of known relief programs. So again, vaccination program or subsidized food ration, programs that are really, really quite well publicized. Here we don't really find an effect between the different groups. But what is interesting is when we split it by caste, we see that the control group knows significantly less about known relief sources. Again, confirming to us that actually those from most socially disadvantaged backgrounds have access to less information, even those known programs, and they would likely be the people benefiting most from them. We see that they know less about this. Now, secondly, we start looking at take-up. Were they actually able to take up different sources of relief? And well, here's the middle finger, as Rajesh calls it, is very prominently back again. And on the side, so formal help means NGOs and help from NGOs, governments, local health workers, or local banks. So that includes loans. And we really see this massive jump. I mean, more than 15, I think it's 17% compared to control group increase in the number of people that actually were able to take up formal help. And similarly, we find, slightly less, but still a big effect size, I think 15% compared to placebo group. Now, we do the same, we split again by caste. And what we see is that this affects even higher for those in lower caste. Even when we compare it to higher caste who are also in sales. But really what we see is that those people belonging to lower caste really took this opportunity and were significantly more likely to have taken up formal help. Now we go to psychological resilience, and we asked them a number of questions about how pessimistic they were about the future. And here we sort of see a reverse pattern. And we see that those in the sales condition were significantly less likely to be pessimistic about the future. 20% is very pessimistic about the future, compared to 36% in the control and 32% in the placebo. Again, when we split it up, we see similar patterns, but again, we see the effect being magnified for those of lower caste, a real drop compared to control and placebo groups. Now, last, we also look at ability to cope. So we asked them a number of questions about their perceived likelihood. How do you think you can cope with this adversity? Do you think you'll be able to overcome this adversity? And what we see here is a significant decrease in perceived inability to cope compared to control. but we don't find a difference between sales and placebo employment. So at first we were a bit puzzled about this, but what it actually signals is that in this case, having employment itself, even if you're not working at the moment, but having this option of actually starting to work again in the future itself actually contributes somewhat to psychological resilience, which also makes sense because there's some sort of future prospect for you to earn an income again. Now, next, so again, we look at it by caste, and what we really see in here, would like you to look in the lower caste in the control condition. We see that actually those from most disadvantaged backgrounds are the most likely. Like you see this real increase in there. So again, confirming that those most disadvantaged are really, at a very bad position, and offering them some form of employment really helps. Now, the second research question that we had was about the mechanism. Why would sales employment lead to more resilience? What we do there is we mentioned connections, the width of connections. So we split it up by formal connections, which is connections with people who have ties to institutions. Think about village council, health workers, doctors, etc. And very much in line with the take-up of formal help, we see that those women in sales have much wider connections compared to placebo and control. Again, when we split it by caste, we see the similar effect as we've been seeing those from lower caste, especially taking up, expanding their connections. We also look at informal connections. And again, here we see again also an increase by sales. And what I'd like to highlight here is that in this case, those in sales were significantly more likely to have connections with other villagers or local shop owners, not their family members or neighbors, as one would expect, but they're actually expanding their set of connections within the village. And again, we look at it by caste. And again, see that lower castes seem to really outperform. Now, there could be a whole set of alternative explanations. So I'm just going to address a couple of them, but it could be that you say, well, is it connections, or is it just that if you do sales, you get rejected a lot, like people say no? So we asked a number of these questions, like I face a lot of rejection in my work, or I'm good at overcoming setbacks. And what we see here, there's no significant difference between placebo and sales, signaling effectively that this is not the case. There may be something, but we're not finding it in here. Similarly, it could be, if I'm conducting sales, it's so uncertain, they might be more used to uncertainty, and sort of a pandemic adversity is inherently uncertain. You don't know what the future is going to look like. Again, we don't find a significant difference between placebo and sales, sort of nudging towards connections really being one of the main mechanisms. So in a nutshell, this is what we did for the resilience paper. Now, I'm going to preview you, and this is very much in line with the video, is what we're going to do next. And this is where we actually measure the impact on gender empowerment. So we want to understand, how does income beyond earning how does employment beyond earning an income affect women's empowerment? And this really goes to that question of, is there something inherently in the work that we do, in the jobs that we do, that actually changes us and makes us potentially stronger? I invite everyone to think about themselves. For those who are in academia, earning an income, for example, is a part of our job, but there's so much more in it. And that's actually at the core of this second paper, where we measure the impact on women's empowerment, psychologically empowerment, leadership roles, do they take up more leadership roles, as well as gender perceptions, health. And this, we already did some sort of pre-test of this in the resilience study, where we already saw that the women in sales became this leadership figure within their community amidst the adversity. Were you a source of support for your community members, or did people reach out to you for advice and information? We already see this spike in sales employment, in particular for those in lower caste. So This data collection is ongoing. We've done quite a lot already. There's one last thing pending, but we already collected survey data and video data, which I'll show you. And based on this, these are some of the preliminary results. So we started in 2019, and this data is measured in August 23. And what we see is the percentage of women at that moment, 4 years after the study, that work as health workers, this is a government employment, is significantly higher, I mean, more than double in the sales condition compared to the other two conditions. They were significantly more likely to actually have this community or political participation. They attended village meetings much more. Again, almost double the effect size. They felt safer within their own village, and I omitted it from here, but we also see that they're much more mobile. So they're going out much more. They're going to different places in their village by themselves, which is intertwined with, I feel more safe in my village. People know me. We also look at psychological empowerment. One of the things is relative well-being. So how, compared to everybody else, how good is your life? How healthy are you, etc. Women in sales report themselves to be significantly better off than others. Another characteristic practice is this veil, the gungas. They were, I mean, you see a huge drop. They were, after working for 4 years with us as saleswomen, we see that the need or the percentage of women that need to wear this veil indoors significantly drops compared to the other two groups. Now, this field practice, but also more on that line, we're very interested in measuring psychological resilience. And one of the things that we do is we collected baseline videos as well as endline videos for all 1,048 women, which we're going to code on a number of dimensions. For example, whether they need to use the veil before and after, as well as different dimensions such as confidence or extroversion. These are all going to be coded by multiple external raters. But let me just show you 2 examples. This is the same woman. The video on the left is the one which I'm going to show now, is the one at baseline when she hadn't started working with us yet. So in this, I hope you really saw her movements, her body language. You know, did she look confident? Was she extroverted? And this was the same woman 4 years later after working with us for 4 years. So effectively what you see in here is not only is she no longer wearing the veil, she's taken it off. Also the way she speaks, much less hesitation. So in this case, it's muted. We also will code all the audio, what she says, but the way that she speaks, the conviction, the confidence in this is exactly one of the other things in which we're trying to capture psychological empowerment, the confidence that you have, which we know is so important for women actually to be empowered, to actually take up, for example, leadership roles in their community, political roles within their districts, have influence in household decision-making. So all of this is part of the wider research agenda that we have with Dharma Life. So this was just a very short preview about it. So let me conclude, and then we can go to questions, is in a nutshell, this research seeks to understand the differential impact of employment on resilience beyond earning an income, as well as the future research on gender empowerment. And what we find is that sales employment can positively impact the lives of people, particularly for those most disadvantaged. So what we find is a higher awareness, particularly of less known sources of relief, higher take-up of formal, so government or NGO-based relief sources, They're less pessimistic about the future, somewhat more likely to cope with adversity. This, again, was the effect that we found for both employment conditions. But really what we see is they have this much wider set of connections. Particularly, they're more likely to be connected with people who have ties to institutions and who can help them. So this directly addresses the recent and urgent calls for a better understanding on how to build resilience psychologically as well as socio-economically among poor and vulnerable communities, and really highlighting the role that actually business can play in this. So some of the implications in this is for managers who want to align business goals with social impact goals could seek to improve employee welfare by incorporating wide opportunities to connect within their employment. This can enable their employees to become more resilient in the personal life, but also can allow them to, give a stage or support those belonging to more disadvantaged groups. Similarly, policymakers, there's a lot of policymakers that are looking into different forms of employment programs, often with the idea of actually supporting income. And what this research says is you may want to incorporate some external facing components that allow you to interact if you as a policymaker are interested in reaching more outcomes than just more financial means. And in essence, what we see is this issue that we said at the very beginning, this low take-up of so many people of government programs, in particularly those that are most in need of them, the most socially disadvantaged. We see that sales employment actually really fosters the take-up because they're able to get the information they need about the existence as well as how to get these different programs. So thank you so much. Let's go to questions. Thank you.
I think the idea is we'll get questions. We can take questions on the chat. And if there are no questions, we can end early. Christian wants to know product characteristics. Here is
well, I can answer the first question. So what are the consequences of the prior form of cooking? Health hazards. So the prior form of cooking is often open fires indoors, so health hazards. So you can think about likelihood of fires, as well as the unhealthy breathing in the unhealthy smoke. So yeah, therefore clean cooking stoves have been developed basically to overcome some of these health hazards. Yeah.
But also, if I could add to that, and also especially relevant to this project, it would be that the new form of cooking, the induction stoves, etc., are seen as more aspirational, more sort of technological, modern, etc. Especially since these villages have received electricity in many cases and relatively recently. So the women, when they go out and sell the induction stoves, it's as if they're also bringing some city life or modern appliances to the village.
Yeah, to add to that, I think one can say that for standing up and cooking, it's aspirational. It helps. The gender empowerment as well. So that I think the perception is one of the big things here, apart from the health benefit.
Yeah. So the other question is from Golbeen. Did you conduct a cost benefit of the intervention? Do you have a sense for how scalable this is. That's Gaurav, do you want to take that? So Gaurav is the CEO. Iris, of course, please jump in as well. Gaurav is the CEO of the organization that of Dharma Life, the organization you saw. How scalable is this, Gaurav? Right now, maybe you could give us a sense of the scale, Gaurav, of Dharma Life's operations, and then we can go from there to your future plans, etc.
Sure. So we have 18,000 entrepreneurs like the ones you saw at the moment, and who have worked across about 14,000 villages. Each of them covers 2 to 3 villages. In terms of scalability of intervention, I mean, I think there's 2 levels here of scalability. One is obviously the entrepreneur model itself. So it's quite expensive to set up a women entrepreneur in such a village. So it takes a lot of time and effort, I think, as well as actually time for them to build confidence. I think, as we can see from the years in question from baseline to end. But apart from this, it's also, once you have it, then it's obviously quite sustainable, right? Because you can put many different solutions through that system, and you have a kind of embedded change maker in the community. So then I think we have had entrepreneurs stay with us for 5, 6, 7, 8 years doing this. And obviously we have to continuously evolve what are the things we are kind of getting them to work on. So I think that's kind of what I would talk about. And yeah, further questions maybe.
Gaurav,
I hope that answers, Rajesh.
Yeah. Just on that, a number of the folks in the audience are from the IFC. What's been the IFC connection? Just with Dharma Life? The World Bank, can you hear us?
The IFC connection is that we work with both for IFC and World Bank have been partners. IFC is part of the Lighting Global program and Lighting Asia program, where IFC invested in some of the, and there's another study which I think at some point we'll do a webinar around results-based financing for climate action, especially energy access, which was supported by IFC and the Lighting Global program. So we promoted solar lights to the entrepreneurs. And with the World Bank, we have been working on a lot of the cooking studies, I think, around both biomass stoves and stoves, and this from a clean air perspective.
We lost you partly, Gaurav. I know you're out and about in India at the moment. I think you meant the World Bank study involved biomass.
Biomass stoves, and it was a clean air perspective.
Okay.
Clean air.
So yeah, in terms of scale, there has been some scale. The cost benefit is, I don't think we've done a formal cost benefit in this study. In other studies we have. And sort of the fact that Dharma Life is scaling this up implies that it's not a massive loss, although it's a longer conversation, I suppose, about collaborations, etc. Iris, do you want to take the question on, and Gaurav, on how do these compare between rural and peri-urban women in terms of sales employment? These 3 districts were not terribly urban, yeah? You're on mute.
So yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Gaurav.
No, you can go ahead, but these were all very rural, right? So imagine tier 4, tier 5 villages of 500 households typically, so very rural. But obviously we catered to them from an urban kind of hub, right? But they were all rural villages.
But if the 2 of you had to speculate about relative differences between rural and peri-urban, even though we don't have evidence yet?
I mean, cultural practices would be similar also in peri-urban, so I don't think that would be the issue. The access and availability would be obviously much stronger for the modern solutions. I mean, although now it's become relative with the e-commerce companies supplying, but I would have see a lot of similarity. But I mean, since we did the study, a lot of the work with the government around the gas stoves has kind of scaled, and though that availability is much better in urban areas.
Great. Iris, anything on?
No, I'll add to Gaurav's point. In essence, obviously, one of the reasons why the women are really able to form much more connections is rurally is because there's less supply to some extent, but Gaurav already said, online retailers are anyways present. So there is more of a buzz created around actually being that person bringing the products into the rural areas. So therefore, my hypothesis would be that the effect size would be somewhat smaller in peri-urban areas, but we would still find an effect, because what is so crucial, and Dharma Life does is absolutely beautiful, is we see that just selling these products is not sufficient. Think about the female hygiene pads. It really requires the women actually to do some educational marketing campaigns as well on why you should use it. So clean cooking stoves is a great example. There's some stereotypes around this for making the food less nice. And this would also be required to, at least to some extent, in peri-urban areas. So I hope that answers your question, Joel.
If I could just add, the other striking thing in India is that levels of female labor force participation, which are rather low by global standards to begin with, are especially low in urban India. Now, peri-urban, I'm not as sure. So urban Indian women are even less likely to work outside the home than rural Indians, more of whom are involved in, for example, agricultural activities. So to the extent that sales activities involve going outside and interacting with others, especially other strangers, it's hard to tell which of these will be stronger. Sonia,
I can talk to this question.
yes. Do you want to just repeat that question first, Iris?
So Sonia is asking, were you able to track the implications of the wider set of connections with institutions? What were these women leveraging these connections for? So this is also a great question. Thank you, Sonia. So the thing is, obviously, we had to collect data amidst the COVID-19 Delta wave. We had to do this phone-based because we couldn't move. You know, the women were in the midst of the distress. So unfortunately, we couldn't do too long surveys. But what we see is, and I've done these analyses, I didn't show them to you, is actually when we start mapping, did you have a connection, for example, with an NGO worker? I can directly, when we do the regression analysis, we directly see that this is the most determinant driver for your likelihood of taking up NGO work. The same goes with if you have, if you know the local health workers, you got the same. So basically, when we, in individual regressions, just with the treatments, with a couple of controls, we basically are always able to match for formal connections and formal take-up. So this is a strong indication that actually these connections were leveraged at that moment to be able to take up sources of help. But sort of the wider set is actually that now we did, as I mentioned, in 2023, in August, we did a survey. So there we asked these questions again, like, do they have the phone numbers, a number of things. As well as what we're doing now is we're doing a behavioral event to actually objectively measure their empowerment, and where we again will measure whether these women are able to leverage these formal connections, so connections that they have maybe with an NGO, with a local village leader, actually to leverage them to support a cause that they have to implement. I'm gonna not go too much into details, but basically we can directly link it during COVID, and we're doing more work to keep on linking this. But we see very strong results. So, you know, interaction, take-up of employment, now what we've also measured, as well as actually take-up of resilient sources at that moment.
Perfect. I think that brings us to the top of the hour. Thank you all for joining and for these excellent questions. The work is still ongoing in many ways. So I've already been taking some notes about that are based on these questions. It's been a pleasure to have you. We are in the process of writing up a paper based on this. So at some point we should have a paper based on this as well. Thank you all, and all the best, and stay in touch. Bye.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.